And I had a workshop the other day, and I was telling people there, the best time to learn is now, because the cost of making mistakes is proportionally much lower now than they will be in 5 years from today. So right now, very few businesses are running on, a good foundation of AI automation, for an example, or have managed to bring AI to high value parts in the business, which means that your competitors are also struggling just yet like you. But think if it was the other way around, all your competitors were performing great with this technology, and they were, going from one thing to another thing, and business was just booming for them, and you were still in the stage where you were trying to figure this out. That's when your mistakes can cost you a lot, even your business. So making those, pilots now, making these investments now, maybe they're not paying off, but what you should make sure is that you draw the learnings.
The New Form Podcast, Episode 3 with Michael Eriksson.
Hi, I'm Adam Halverson, CEO at Newform, the technology partner helping businesses build and improve apps, platforms, and AI solutions. Welcome to the Newform Podcast, where I speak with founders, CEOs, and business leaders about technology, innovation, and building successful businesses. Today, I'm pleased to be joined by Michael Eriksson, founder and CEO of Liminal Discovery. Michael founded Liminal Discovery in 2019 after more than 20 years of industry experience. Liminal helps organizations navigate complexity, align strategy and technology with purpose, and design services, strategies, and technologies that work in real life. The timing for this conversation is perfect. AI has made it easier than ever to build prototypes, demos, and early versions of software. But that creates a much bigger question for leaders. If building is cheaper and faster, then what are we actually building? Why does it matter? And how do we make it survive contact with real businesses? Today, we will talk about why so many products and AI pilots fail to reach production, what clients are really paying for now, and how businesses can balance speed, governance, durability, and genuine value. Michael, welcome to the New Form Podcast.
Thank you, Adam. Great to be here.
Great to have you on. So Michael, for anyone meeting you for the first time, can you tell us a little bit about your background and what led you to founding Liminal Discovery?
All right, this fairly long story. I'll try to cut it short. I originally could be interesting to know. I thought I was going to start working within chemical engineering. I actually studied chemical engineering at the university. But during my time there, I found so many different things that I got interested in. I had a hard time to focus. So when I actually started to work back in 2005, I joined a consultancy firm called Nordic Financial Systems, supporting the European Central Bank, various central banks in Europe, and Fortune 500 companies with their wealth management, risk management, and cash management systems. Then in 2007, I was offered the opportunity to start working with actually Magnus, who were here on the last podcast, and Daniel, who at the time had founded a company called Golden Gecko. That was working with mobile app development, and this is on the J2Me platform primarily. So as you might hear from that, it's before the Android and iPhone came along. And obviously when Android and Apple came along, things changed dramatically. And from being a very niche player, all of a sudden we became one of the biggest app development agencies in Europe, and basically worked with all the top brands and companies. In 2012, the company was purchased by an American consultancy company called DMI, actually where I met you also, where we worked together.
I actually joined Golden Gecko before
you did
before the purchase. I'm an original gecko.
You are right indeed, Adam. I'm sorry for that. So
that's all right.
So when we met at Golden Gecko, so you know the journey also. So what I found to be very interesting with DMI as a company was that they had as a strategy to provide services for end-to-end digital transformation. And as we both know, the company was stitched together by specialized companies in various areas in this chain. And the fact that it was niche players that were stitched together I found gave a mass of extremely smart and talented people. And I really enjoyed my time at DMI because it gave me an opportunity to learn from so many various expert practitioners within their fields. Now, during this, so what led me to start Liminal Discovery, though? So one thing I found when we were working at DMI, and we had, a lot of really, really good customers, and some customers came to us with really ambitious plans. They had budget, they had a strategy that was bought in from senior leadership. In one case, there was actually so far that the whole senior leadership had been brought in just to execute a new strategy that was going to be enabled through digital transformation. Now, although on paper, all the right things seem to be in place, it seemed to be very difficult for these companies to actually make the transformation to a new business model, to a new way of operating the business. So I started to really think about this. What is it? It's not a lack of senior leadership buy-in. There is not a lack of funding. There is not a lack of a strategy or an idea about how to execute on this. But what is it that still holds these companies back? And I couldn't get away from the fact that working with these clients, many of them, had these parallel system, or rather they had one master system of operating the business. That was the legacy systems. That's where you had the KPIs that people were measured on. You had the incentive systems. You had the whole organizational structure. And you had the people's general understanding of what the purpose of the business was. In many ways, maximizing the revenue, minimizing cost, whatever that could be in their domain. But they struggled to move from that to the new model or to the new organization or the new way of operating the business. And the more I thought about it and the more I, did a retrospective, what went wrong, I felt that one of the biggest missing pieces that I could find was the business had somewhere along the road lost touch with what was the core purpose of that business. It basically became a revenue generation machine, or you built the products because that gave you revenue, or you delivered a service because that was what gave you the revenue. You didn't really think about what is it that the product is actually here to do, or what is it that the service is actually here to do, because a product or a service ultimately is there to solve a problem, reduce a pain point, or give some sort of value to a user. And that might not always look the same depending on how technology evolves or how an industry evolves. But having that understanding, that fundamental understanding of what the business purpose was very often lacking, I felt. And if you don't have that, it is so much harder to reimagine the business in a new light, in a new technology paradigm. So that's really what made me decide, what, I want to give this a go. I want to start my own business, and I want to focus on, purpose-led transformation. And what that really means is that we're trying to look at what is it in this business that is the whole profound purpose for being here, to be existing. And if we release everything else of the business as we know it, and we only keep the purpose of that business, how would we shape and how would we build that business in today's technology, with today's technology? And I have a firm belief that if you really get to the purpose, it's something that eventually, or not eventually, but that people in the organization will relate to. They will understand it, and they will understand it more than they will read a report, or they will read, specifications or whatnot. If they know this is what we're trying to achieve in the best possible way, you will have an easier way to move the whole organization, the people, the structures, and eventually also the incentive systems and the operational system, the policies and whatnot will follow with that. So that's really what Liminal Discovery was founded on, the base of, driving digital transformation with a deeper understanding of what the purpose is. And if you look at the name Liminal Discovery, liminal comes from the word liminality, which is a word that signifies the passage between what used to be and what will be, but you have not yet become that part. So basically, the part in between, when you have stopped being what you used to be, but you have yet not become that part. And that gap is what I've found most organizations or people is struggling to pass through. That's the part that is holding back, because very often organizations feel the resistance or the difficulties are too large to move from what used to be to what will be, and they fall back and they move back to what they know and what feels comfortable. So we're basically a firm that is helping our clients, in smaller parts or in bigger parts, to make that transition from what used to be to the new model. Basically, that's what we're setting out to do.
No, great, and makes perfect sense. And I mean, that's something that we've had conversations about that I think is super important. But I guess with that said, and before we get into other topics and sort of more broader stuff, I think what could be really helpful is just to give a brief idea on how would Liminal actually help a company do that? Just for someone who, not from, let's say, our industry, but they're trying to figure this stuff out. What's a typical engagement look like or made up of?
So the engagement we've had throughout the years have been slightly different of character. Like I said before, it depends on the ambition and the starting point where we're coming in. But very often it's actually been about trying to reinvent a part of the business. And that could be finding new revenue streams, or that can be finding new ways to deliver a service or enhance the value of a product. So we had a customer in the home appliance industry, for an example, which is quite interesting because home appliances we look as physical products. A stove is a stove and it should be in a certain way. A refrigerator is a refrigerator and that should be, a box where you keep things cold. But when you start to look at the purpose of it, you start to see it slightly different. So let's take the refrigerator for an example. So why is the refrigerator there to start with? Well, of course, it's there to keep food cold, store food. But the real purpose of it, when we're starting to penetrate and get into it, is to prolong the lifespan of the food. And by doing so, reducing the waste that we're having to throw away food, so the food waste. And it's also there to keep the food more healthier. So when you're starting to look at it from that perspective, you can see, all right, so if this is to reduce food waste and to make food more healthy, so to make it better for us to eat, then you have two new paths where you can basically add value to that product. One can be to help people with the purchasing patterns, making sure that you're not buying too much of something that you have, or that you keep track on the dates of the things that you have there. And if you're looking on the food as, or the preservation of food as a health incentive, then all of a sudden you can see that there is an incentive to help people choose more healthy options or better purchasing options, and so forth and so forth. So one project we did there, for an example, was to prototype services around a refrigerator to see how could we make the value of owning this refrigerator higher by providing digital services that comes along with the hardware. So that is one example, where a company are looking to reinvent a product or enhance the value or create new revenue streams to it. But we're also working in areas such as, closely related to us or to you also in Nuform, which is about, helping companies with their everyday of building along on the roadmap of a service that they're offering, digital services. And we've also worked on internal productivity systems, finding internal productivity gains, or process reorganization, or service design across an entire customer journey. So how can we provide the optimal customer experience for our clients or our clients' clients?
And yeah, so just to comment on that, I mean, obviously I know a little bit about Liminal, and I know that the business works across strategy, transformation, service design, and technology. For business leaders who haven't done this before or are trying to work this out, again, like I said in the last question, but how do these disciplines come together in the work that you do with clients?
I think you need, and this is, something I debate quite often with people who try to, and I could be wrong in this. Let me just be honest about it. But I very often have people telling me that you need to be more focused, more niched. Pick strategy or pick technology or pick, pick a lane, so to speak. For me, the lane is actually the the whole connectivity that these practices offers. Because if you want to build, you're looking to build a service or a digital product, um, you need to understand the strategy of the business to tie that service or product to the overarching strategy for the business. If you're looking at foresight, if you're looking at, um, you know, market understanding and so forth, you need to have that to understand what is it that the customers actually are expecting. What do they want? What is the likelihood that people will choose to engage with this? And then the technology is really the enabler of things, but you need to know the technology track. You need to understand, how can we do this in the most cost efficient way? How can we do this in the most customer experience friendly way? So by tying these together, and in reality, I think most providers try to stretch their focused area one or two steps up or down this, so to speak. What I'm trying to offer is basically a business holistic perspective. So if we're going to work with transformation, once again, we need to understand what it is we're going to transform. To understand what we're going to transform, we need to understand the business strategy. We need to understand the purpose. And then we need to understand how that transformation can happen and how it's going to look. And once you've decided, what it's going to look like and you've reimagined the business, I shouldn't be, respectless and say the easy part is technology, but the hard part, the hard thinking part, the judgment part, comes before you apply technology. I think we both have seen examples where people are trying to fit solution upon technology rather than using technology to provide the solution. So I would say that we're broad technologically or techno agnostic, technologically agnostic, but the technology is the enabler. So you need to have that layer. That's kind of what makes things possible. But if you don't have the judgment and the understanding from the levels above that, so to speak, how do you know that what you're building is really going to have the impact that you're trying to achieve? That's my belief. But what it does, create as a problem is, of course, you look at it, it looks like it's a very wide range of services or expertises, and that makes it unfocused. In my view, this is actually our focus. This is what makes us a niche player, so to speak, because we're not one of the big agencies. We're competing with the Accentures of the world, but we're not Accenture by scale. But we are, going for the how should I say, the hard value rather than the size of an engagement or the bulk. So we're not going to staff an engagement with hundreds of junior consultants, but we're going to put the senior people in place that understands what it is that we're trying to achieve.
So really what you're saying is it's really having pretty deep integration into all areas of the business, having a team that can operate across those kind of critical areas of that business. Um, and I mean, as you know, I totally agree. I think since the dawn of digital transformation, which is a phrase I've never particularly liked, if I'm honest. It's still happening now, obviously, and we're going to get into this, but with AI, everybody's starting the wrong way around. They're starting with the technology. It's something that's fallen on their lap, and they're like, okay, well, how do we make this fit in? So I guess with that said, you said to me recently the prototype was the easy part for the wrong reason. What did you mean by that?
It might sound a bit weird in itself, but yeah. So with the new technology, and I like to refer to, we have to remember that AI, as we refer to AI today, is different from what AI used to be, and we can come back to that. The difference between logic built AI and learning built AI. But what the modern type of AI has done, the one that now is available to all of us through, Claude, ChatGPT, Perplexity, Manus, or whatever tool you choose, um, has lowered the bar to build the prototype. So now anyone can basically spin up a prototype in no time. And people are spinning up prototypes in no time. But building the prototype in the past, yes, it took time to do it, and you needed to invest some budget towards it, but that was never really the hard part. It was the easy part. But now it's even more easy, but it's easy for the wrong reasons. And what I mean with that is the when things get easy to do, it's very easy to apply it to easy things to find. So what do I mean with that? I mean symptoms, surface problems. So it's obvious, you can see here is something that people are, struggling with, or we could make this faster, we could make this easier. But very often these surface problems, they are known. People know them, and they have been accepted. They could probably be solved in the past, but they have been accepted because the cost, or rather, I would say, the value of fixing them has not been so high that it's motivated anyone to go for it. But what they often are, though, the surface problems are often an indication of a deeper problem, something that is really difficult to solve. And we're talking about pain points that are sensed through, the leadership levels, through the organization. But that means that you need to apply a deeper understanding of the processes or of the business or of the business model. And that's where the judgment comes in. And this is where the seniority of people comes in. AI helps you do the work, but it cannot replace the judgment or the experience or the knowledge about a business that allows you to understand what are the fundamental challenges here. So the prototype, can now be easily showed in demo, and it will look great, and people will be swayed by, oh, I can see how this can work, and so forth. But the real question is, has the work been done to truly understand what the core issue is? What is the real problem? Because that's where the high value is. And that, I feel, is where there is still some struggling, thanks to partly because it's become so easy to build prototypes that the hard work of understanding profoundly what the real problem you're trying to solve is kind of moving away, because if it costs you very little to develop something, people might not spend as much, up front to truly understand what they should do. They just jump into the development, and by doing so, they're missing the main point. So that's really what I'm trying to say, that the prototype is not really the hard job work, and it's not really the problem. The problem has always been to understand what problem it is we're trying to solve.
Why do you think this message is so hard for business leaders to understand? I get it. It sometimes feels to businesses that you're paying someone to just tell them about your business, and sort of I still have conversations today where, well, every conversation today is like, oh no, we just want to get going, or we just want to build something, or and I understand that because tooling is making that more possible because you can learn quicker and things are iterate much faster. But I just still fail to understand, like, why do you think that this is still such an issue?
I think there are many reasons to it, but how should I put this? I actually think that senior leaders, people who've worked in a company or in industry for a long time, instinctively they know this. They know the pain points, but they've learned to accept them. And by accepting them, internalize them as a way, this is just how it is. So you've accepted a shortcoming in a whole industry or a shortcoming in a company because you've learned to manage the pain in such a way that you don't feel it the same way anymore. So I think sometimes we need to kind of reveal the pain points again. That's one part, I think. It's been a slow acceptance of this is just how things are, and you don't even see the problems anymore because you lived with them so long. So it's just part of the fabric, so to speak. I think that can be one of the reasons. Another reason is if you're really trying to solve a fundamental problem or a fundamental pain point in a business or an industry, that very often comes with profound changes. And we know that changes are difficult for organization as well as individuals. So when you're getting to these points of fundamental change, there will start to be a certain resistance. It will be nervousness. What if I fail? What if it doesn't work? What is the alternative costs and so forth. So there is a level of hesitations because you don't know what the impact will be or the cost will be, and putting yourself on the line, putting your job on the line, it's a hard call for anyone to make, basically. And that can, in many cases, be another one. It's kind of easier to stay in the lane where everyone else is
Yeah.
than, jumping over where no one else is right now.
Yeah.
And the last part, I also, think is not uncommon, is when you've worked in an industry for a very long time, you've gotten used to how things are done, which makes it hard to all of a sudden reimagine it. What would it look like if we were just, because basically your entire career, maybe you've evolved through the layers of an organization by learning each step of the path. And by each step, you're getting more and more of an expert of the system that business truly is, or the system that industry is. So this system knowledge has basically been what's taken you to a leadership position or to a management position. And all of a sudden we're coming in and we're saying that, you know what, all that system knowledge you have, let's question that. Let's upheal that. And let's see if there is a completely different way of doing it. And that puts a challenge in many levels, from we're asking somebody to release a large part what have made them to what they are today. And we're asking them to imagine something that no one else is doing, which in itself can be pretty difficult. And if you're applying that on a system level where you basically, and we can talk about that more, if you're using automation like we used to do in digital transformation, but also automation with AI or, building agentic layers and so forth, the real value doesn't come from applying that to a single step in a process. You speed up the process, but you just move the bottleneck. So you basically need to either remove full parts of a process or the process in itself, or you need to completely rethink how that process would look if we apply technology to it. And I don't think there is, you know, uh, there is a reason why very often these type of reimagined ways of doing things comes from startups.
Yeah.
Because they don't have the legacy systems, and maybe they have a founder that haven't spent 30 years in the industry and is accustomed to it, but it's somebody without respect for the old paradigm, and they've just seen a different way to do it, and they dive in and they reimagine things from there. But I think it's those three parts that can make it hard to, because deep down, if you really wake a business leader up and ask him the hard questions, uh, they know somewhere deep down, they know.
Yeah.
It's just a question about allowing themselves to bring it up and to act on it. That's my belief.
I think I completely agree with all of that. It is sort of really it's a comfort thing. It's a fear of change thing, and all of the other things that you mentioned. So I guess sort of moving on slightly. So You mentioned, for example, like the prototype you did with the prototyping work that you did with the white goods company. Um, you must have read the same report that I have. I think everybody's read it. The MIT pilot purgatory, which probably should stop referencing it so much. But with that, why do you think it is that most, I mean, not just AI pilots, but I think let's say transformative pilots, or whether it's an app, a platform, a service of some kind, whether it's B2C, B2B, why do you think that those pilots are dying in that gap between the kind of demo stage and the operation? Because we're supposed to be in this era where all of this tooling is making things so much faster and so much more accessible and democratized and cheaper. But actually, well, it ties into your original, the original point you made around just because things can go faster, that that doesn't necessarily mean a good thing. But why do you think that those pilots are just dying? And I think the stat is what, 95% of prototypes or pilots are not progressing into production or operation.
Yeah, so the number 95% is that companies can't identify any significant ROI on the investments that they've made or the products they've bought in and so on. And truth be told, I think that is to be expected. And it should probably not be seen as a failure for those 95% if you are looking at it, because we are in a very early stage of this transformation. So if you back the tape on the internet or .com and so forth, in the early days, most projects didn't deliver on that promise of performance improvements or magnificent new revenues and so forth. And that must be okay, because in the early days, it's about learning, really. And I had a workshop the other day, and I was telling people there, the best time to learn is now, because the cost of making mistakes is proportionally much lower now than they will be in 5 years from today. So right now, very few businesses are running on, a good foundation of AI automation, for an example, or have managed to bring AI to high value parts in the business, which means that your competitors are also struggling just yet like you. But think if it was the other way around, all your competitors were performing great with this technology, and they were, going from one thing to another thing, and business was just booming for them. And you were still in the stage where you were trying to figure this out. That's when your mistakes can cost you a lot, even your business. So making those, pilots now, making these investments now, maybe they're not paying off, but what you should make sure is that you draw the learnings. Okay, so we tried this. What was it that didn't work? Why couldn't we get the performance improvements that we were looking at? And that's okay, because every organization will go through this, because first you have the individual learning. People need to understand the technology so they can see how it fits into their work. But then the organization, and here is the real reason why I think that you don't see the benefits of the AI projects fully yet, because once the individuals know it, you need to get the organization to work together, to understand this together. Basically meaning that everyone in the organization needs to have a fundamental understanding that they all share about what this technology can mean, because that's when you can start to connect the dots. And that's where I believe that you will start to see the real ROI on AI. It's not when you're using it for, automation one step. Let's say, I'm going to do all my marketing analysis. I'm going to pull all the stats, and I'm going to have my nice dashboard and so on. Okay, so if you've cut maybe a day's work that you're using every week to get the data in, and you get your dashboard up and all of that thing, but it doesn't really move the needle, because that speed is one day for one person. But if you connect the whole thing, so the whole process becomes, with a layer of AI for automation and judgment calls, and then you have the human in the loop that is making the final decisions and approvals, that's when you're starting to see it. But to get there, an organization first needs to go through these learning phases. So individual learning and then organizational learning, and then you can apply it on the business. So, I look at the number of 95% as, yes, it brings people down and it makes some people say, well, it's just not worth it. And I challenge that and I say it the other way around, which is that now is the time when you pay less to learn more. So this is the time when you really should experiment. You should allow yourself to make mistakes. You should allow yourself to fail. Actually, if you don't fail, you've not tried hard enough. So all companies need to, have an allowance for a certain amount of failure in the system and see that not as a bad thing, but as an expected thing. And, measuring failures as a measurement, are we trying hard enough, could be an alternative way to do it. Sometimes corporate enterprise governance systems are there to eliminate mistakes or eliminate failure. But if you eliminate failure, you're always going to stay on the safe side of things. And the safe side of things rarely brings you to something fundamentally different or new. And as we are in a paradigm shift, because let's face it, AI as a technology, will change things more than we can probably fathom right now. And you need to be allowing yourself and the organization to move out of the comfort zone. So I would say, failures are to be expected. Maybe 95% is a little bit on the high side. I think that will drop. But I think the organizations that's going to move along faster than anyone else are the ones that factor in, we will have a certain amount of failures. We will manage that. We will be quick to learn. We will be quick to kill the failures, if we call them failures. We will quick to kill the things that don't work, and then we'll invest on the things that work. And we'll, just describe that to learning. But the short answer to your question also, why the ROI is not coming up, I believe it's because you're not thinking enough on the process, the overall process. You're thinking in steps or tasks, and you're not looking at outcomes. We should, be driving outcomes, faster to value, faster to outcome.
So with regards to outcomes, I mean, what would you say from a metrics or, I don't know, KPI perspective? What would you actually class, let's say, an AI prototype investment? When would you class that it's kind of paid off? What are the things that you need to see either did or did not happen, to sort of avoid this
Yeah.
idea of pilot purgatory?
I've thought about this a lot actually, because I find it interesting because I see two paths to this, so to speak. When you want to count ROI on an investment or a successful project, the easy way in automation is to count on cost savings. How many heads could we reduce?
Yeah.
How much tooling could we reduce? Or whatever that cost is, you're looking at how much of the cost you could reduce. I think that's a very defensive and frankly I don't think that's the right approach to look at it. You will make savings. There is that opportunity, and companies will use it to make savings. And I'm not saying that that's not a way to capture value of it, but bigger value, and this is where it's so hard to measure it, is the acceleration of moving the needle, acceleration of outcomes, output. Now, as we both share the space of let's say app development, for an example, if you applied AI on your entire development chain, from the product manager, product owners, all the way to the DevOps team, for an example, and you apply that and you say, you know what, we can reach the same outcome and we can reduce the headcount with 20%. And then you're saying that we have, made a cost saving by applying AI on this. And this is what we've realized, between the cost of the AI and the cost of the staff reduction, then this is what we've achieved. But if you turn that around instead, and you say, using the same staff, we managed to churn out, let's say, 2 new releases in each sprint. So, or 2 new releases when we previously had only one. Or let's say that we make 3 releases while we in the past only did one. How do you measure the value of those two additional releases? It brings the business forward faster. It means that your customer experience can evolve faster. You can fix bugs faster. You can do a lot of things. You can react on market changes faster. But it's really, really hard to measure the value of that. You're moving faster along, but the value of each of those incremental steps that you're moving faster might not be direct measurable. And that's the harder part. But that's where I believe that the business value eventually will come. Because if we're looking at companies like Amazon, one of the reasons why Amazon is so much ahead in the e-commerce game, I'm not going to say it's the only thing, because you have everything from logistics and whatnot. But one reason is they are set up and structured in such a way that they can react in seconds or minutes if they need to do updates, or if they want to optimize their site, or they want to make changes based on customer interactions and whatnot. And that gives them an edge all the time. They have these incremental changes that moves faster than the competitors. And though that's where I think the whole, the real big value comes in. So, and it's also in general, and this is what I talk to clients about very often when I come into the meeting rooms and speak to them, is that if you're looking on AI primarily of a cost reduction opportunity to save headcounts and so forth, you're kind of playing or you're surrendering to, or you're playing defense. Because if you instead think about, all right, so with this, how can we tenfold the areas where we can focus on? If you have people in your company that knows your business, and they have learned the organization, they have the network in there, they understand how things work, why not use them to their full capabilities and capacities and scale them with AI? But that demands, more work, because then you need to think about, well, where can we maximize, or where can we add more revenue streams? Where can we do more? Then all of a sudden, that's the hard work. So the easy work is to go back to cost reductions. And it's a safe place to go, because very few people get fired if they're, managing to reduce cost with 20%. But if you're taking a bet and increasing the cost a little bit by applying AI to it, and maybe it takes a year to realize those additional revenue streams and whatnot, that's a risk you take. But that's where the real, I think, benefits will come. That's where the winners eventually will be. You will find the winners that find that they can use AI to scale their business more than they could before, and to accelerate the business to move faster than the competitors. Not the one, you can't save yourself to a winning position. I've never heard a company that saved themselves to monopoly.
No. Well, I guess with what you're saying, when on the flip side, like, when is the right answer to not to build yet? So, so for example, let's say you've established that a pilot doesn't work. What do you do at that stage? Do you go back and because a business is going to be under pressure to build something.
Mhm.
So everybody wants speed, everybody wants results super quick. Um, so in that situation where you're a business, you've invested in prototyping or piloting, you've got, I don't know, commercial need to get things released.
Mhm.
What do you do at that point? When the right answer is actually we're not ready to build yet.
Mhm. Are we talking about AI in our products, or are we talking about digital products in general?
I think it's a good question. I think it applies to both. I would actually say, I would say digital products in general. I think sometimes the conversation these days is always very AI focused, and I think actually the reality of what is
Mhm.
still getting built that actually is driving the most value, in my opinion, and I could get hammered for this, but is I don't think we've moved at the I don't think we've moved at the speed necessarily that everybody hears about from the hype.
I think, one reason why I think that, and why I love digital so much the way that I do, is because it creates kind of a level of infinity of opportunities to things. It gives you the feeling that you can move with the speed of light if you connect dots in the right way, and if you connect information flows and so on. You just feel that the opportunity to flow business processes at the speed of light opens up so many different opportunities with it. But I think it comes back to where we started actually when we spoke about the prototype. And this is where coming back to AI slightly on that, the one thing that AI is not replacing, and it's very clear it's not replacing it, not in its current shape and form at least, and I'm not sure if it will or when it will, but in its current, it does not replace human judgment or human experience of what good should look like or what different could be like. And when it comes to products, it comes back to finding those profound value offerings or profound problems to solve. And I think, and you and I did this often also with clients, we often, stepped up and challenged at times, say, well, is it really an app you need for this? Or is it just that an app would look good for this? And if it's just there to look good, maybe you shouldn't invest all that much to build the app. But if you really need the app, you need to specify, why do I need the app? What is it that this app actually will do for my customers or for myself? And there needs to be two values. There needs to be a value for the users, so the customers, or they will not use the app. But there also need to be a business value. There needs to be a way that the business can capitalize on it, either by direct revenue, marketing, or something else. If those two needs are not truly met in a place where it's essential for both, then maybe it's not the best investment to do. But very rarely, I think the answer is to do nothing. But yeah, I think it is to challenge ourselves to think one and two steps further. And, in many cases, apps that I first thought were, a strange idea because I couldn't see the business idea behind it, or I couldn't see the solution, maybe because I was not experienced enough in that industry or what it was. And I was saying to myself, how on earth will this work? And then you fast forward a couple of years and and they have taken off and they're, performing great. They're delivering great business value. They're great, giving revenue. So, I don't know the answers to it either, but I think to challenge people to think an extra round, and if they, after doing so, feel that, yeah, I profoundly believe in this, everything tells me, go ahead and give it a try. Try to make it as you can test your business. And I know this is something that you're, speaking a lot about also, Adam. Make sure that you have a market fit. Make sure that you speak to your customers. Make sure that you test it. And this is the great part, with AI providing this rapid prototyping opportunity with Lovable or Replit or other no-code platforms, that basically anyone can spin up a new web service or an app in a matter of hours or days, where we previously spent, weeks or months. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. I think where the bad thing enters is where people are confusing those no-code platforms and apps as a robust final product that they can scale a business around.
Yeah.
But I think the opportunity to do products and do live market testing, that's a huge shift, and that's a great opportunity. And I would, say to anyone having a business idea, well, you don't have an excuse anymore. You only need a few $100s and you can go and test it and see if people like it. And if they like it, get more money and get somebody that can, help you turn this into a robust digital product.
Yeah. I mean, the way that we look at it is there's a sensible middle ground in here. I don't think any of us are sitting here saying that we're going to reject, what's happening. But I think that there are obvious factors in sort of moving forwards. And actually that sort of brings me to another question, actually, which is governance. Obviously within all of these yeah, one of the big messages that we give right now with regards to this sort of these rapid delivery approaches is it's sort of, well, what are you trying to build? Are you trying to build something to last, that's scalable, that's secure? Um, but then at the same time, like, I think we both completely understand the this sort of basic approach of, well, why can't we just go super fast? But I
Mm.
think, yeah, I think one of the, to come back to the question is with sort of governance, should we let governance be like should it put the brakes on things, or should it, like should we just launch stuff, figure it out as we go? So and sort of with all of those different components like governance, security, etc. How do you look at that with sort of what's happening?
Well, I always find it interesting because we speak about governance and in some cases regulations, but let's keep it to governance. And we talk about it as breaks, or that it's slowing down things. And the funny part, yes, breaks do a break, it's there to slow something down. A seat belt is there to slow something down. A safety
Yeah.
net is there to slow something down. The purpose to have them there is to avoid, you know, total crashes, accidents, because the consequences of those are higher than getting to the destination faster. So moving faster just to crash into a wall doesn't really take you anywhere. If anything, that might kill your business. So the governance, while it might feel like it's a slow process down, it's actually there to avoid that you crash altogether. And when it comes to building products, if it's a SaaS product or if it's a product that moves towards the private, B2C area, in at least in Europe, we need to be aware we have regulations such as GDPR, for an example, that is protecting users' data and so forth, and for good reasons, very good reasons. Those, they're in place. So besides that, you might be losing your customers' confidence if you leak their data, or if their passwords are hacked, or their credit card details is getting out, or their preferences, if you're having a dating site and all their preferences comes out, or whatnot. There is a direct business, a trust impact there, but it's also regulation impact. So the governance that I see that must be in place is there to protect the end customers, the end users, as well as the business. And then the trick always is to make sure that you are, not overcomplicating it, because then all of a sudden it's a hinder. There is a difference between applying brakes or putting a stop in the middle of the road. And I think that's where the understanding of how you build your governance, how you create governance systems, or how you're structuring things, it's around that. But speaking technically about building something and using governance on the codes and so forth, that is there to protect the business and the users. And if you're not understanding what you're doing under the hood, there is a big risk that something is not right there that you just don't see, but someone else will figure it out. So if your business takes off and you become successful, just to have somebody running a ransom on you, or leaking your customer information, whatnot, is that worth it? Or is it better to get, all right, I got buy-in, things are working, I'm getting clients that are interested. It's time for me to scale the business. Let's move to a secure way. Let's build this the right way to make sure that I have the right security structures in place, and that I'm having the right management of user data and whatnot. So, I think it's a misunderstanding of why you're doing things. Move fast to prove that there is a market traction and that you can make money on it. As soon as you've done that, make sure that you can protect this while you're building and scaling, so you don't lose it all by, crashing into a wall.
Yeah. And so again, based on that, thinking about, for example, like a company like yours or ours, and looking at it from the perspective of, let's say, the customer, what with and I think that what made me think of this question is actually that governance piece is where actually with all of this tooling now, with everything that's shifting so quickly, where do you think the real value actually still lies in working with, let's say a partner such as Liminal? And I don't mean this as like a sales pitch or anything like that, but it's more from actually how do how do how do we help companies to do the right things? So what is
Mm.
it? What is? I guess the first question is what actually is how is the role of let's say an agency changed in this dawn of the new ways of working? But then also like how does that change a team shape for not just like a services firm like Liminal, but I think in general, as an integrated team which has both client side and agency
Mm.
side.
So I think this is really the hard question you're asking now. I've recently written two pieces on LinkedIn just about this, and me myself started to ask myself these questions 2 years ago. And 1 year ago, I really took it by heart to myself and said, "Listen, there is no options but to act on this." Um, so what am I referring to? So in a way, your question is asking. So in the age and day, in the age and time of these new tools, we're talking about AI tools here. Um, why do you need consultancies or agencies? Basically, why do you need them to do the work? Um, there's a few levels on your question, if you allow me to break them down a little bit. So let's start with the for the two of us, I think big part here that I believe and that I like I said, I started to think about it a couple of years ago, if not more, but a couple of years ago, and focused on it last year. Is the way that I look at it is, for the first time, in my career, the the consultancy industry and the agency industry is going through a bigger transformation than our clients actually are doing right
Yeah,
now.
yeah,
So now is the time when we need to apply all our thinking to, what do we make out of this? So it's an exciting and scary time at the same time. But if you're looking at proofs of what's happening, for an example, so in the past we've had these, the four big or the five big ones, and they basically have been scaling in the same way. It's been a pyramid structure. You have the senior consultants and senior partners at the top, and then you have, levels on the way down, all the way to the juniors. And by the end of the day, it's this army of junior and mid-level consultants that is supporting this whole structure, some oftentimes very large structures. But just earlier this month, and it's been continuing earlier this year, we can see one of the leaders in our field, Accenture, struggling right now. And I think that struggle is symptomatic for the struggle that everyone will go through and need to find a way to manage. But the struggle is obviously if, first of all, AI reduces or removes the work that these lower or the bottom layers of the pyramid, so to speak, the army of juniors and mid levels, data gathering, data structuring, analysis, summary, writing presentations, blah, all of this that is a lot of hours of work. It takes a lot of hours to work, and they're been fairly cheap to hire for these firms, and then they are charging high rates for them, and that's how they've been building and making. Everyone has known that that's how it works. But all of a sudden, if those two layers disappears, because now that's automatized, so what are you going to do then? What is the services that you're going to offer, or that these juniors now can do that work in a much more compressed time? Then all of a sudden the hours are compressed. So the value per hour compared to if you get an internal resource to do it compared to an Accenture resource reduced, the hours it takes is reduced. So you're basically compressing it from both sides. That leads to an equation where you have two large suits to fill, and then all of a sudden that puts a a pressure on the rates because, clients will not say that, well, why should I pay you for this and this? It's not worth that much and so forth. That applies a pressure. As the hours shrinks, the agencies or the firms wants to get their resources out. How do they protect the bulk hours? Well, they're going to try to all tricks and so forth, and they're going to start to lower their rates. When they start to lower the rates, that spills over to everyone else, and all of a sudden you have a rate crunch in the whole industry. And eventually you need to ask yourself, is this a race to the bottom? And in that case, is the hourly billing system even possible to preserve? So that's one question that I've been asking myself. So can we sustain an hourly billing rate? Now, the blocker to change that is not just on the seller side, that's also on the purchasing side. Let's be frank, because purchasing organizations for larger companies, they are measured on how much savings they can bring. And the way that they can demonstrate savings is by creating comparable components between competitors. For consultancy firm, that's basically always been the day rate or the hourly rate, because that is something that you can compare on. Things like bespoke capabilities or unique experiences or track record, it's harder to price and compare and see how for purchasing to do that. So purchasing tend to try to find ways to go back to an hour, even on a fixed price project, they want to have your hourly numbers so they can calculate a hourly rate for it so they can compare you. But that I think is going to change, but I don't know how it's going to change, but that's one thing. But then back to your question, which is, the real part, and this is what I think the industry will really shift. What we also see is that the unique advantage of the senior layer is not so strong because boutique firms with seniors, so boutique firms specializing in domains or areas with a high concentration of senior resources with experience, I actually think can be more successful. First of all, they don't need to sustain the pyramid. They just need to make sure that they sustain the senior consultants, the senior advisors. And then all of a sudden they can compete on the exact same level because all of a sudden they don't need the army of juniors, because now they have AI to provide that, foundational work that previously only the big ones could do. They could throw hundreds of juniors into it to gather data. Now you can have a boutique firm that can deliver the same work, and they are competing on the senior level. So that I think is where I see, the crunch. Because coming back then to why should these companies work with companies like ours, and it really comes back to seniority, experience, and judgment. And I think that's where, as a consultancy or as an agency, you need to stand out. You can no longer stand out just by having the capabilities to do something. You need to stand out by being, having the judgment and experience to be able to give advice and get your customers' business to where they want to be. That's where we need to double down. Then the question is, how do we price for that? And I think, I wrote a piece on LinkedIn today about this, where, we need to, I think we're standing in this change where the hours are being compressed, the rates are being compressed, and the holy grail of outcome-based or value-based pricing is forever elusive. It's like a mirage. Everyone talks about it. Nobody really reach, or very few reach, a repeatable business model where they can continue to build businesses on this. Partly because you rarely control the outcome completely. It's normally a collaboration between you and the client, and if the client is making mistakes, you suffer. So, but I do believe we need to get to a place where we can price experience and judgment and seniority to a value that is fair and that is a good business model. The day and age of the pyramid and the junior armies, I think, is coming to an end, which is going to be hard for the big ones to transform through. They're betting down on it, but it's going to be hard. I think, though, for more boutique style agencies or senior centered businesses, I think have a unique opportunity to compete on a different level. And I think, it also needs to start with not only the selling side. The selling side is feeling the pressure, but when it comes to shifting the business models and how that delivers value, eventually there needs to come a new way of working together between customers and consultancies, where purchasing organizations finds way where they can compare agencies without just comparing hourly rates. But how that will look, I don't know. But short answer to your question, sorry for the long elaboration. Short answer is it's by uh, providing that judgment layer that AI cannot give, because AI cannot give you the experience of knowing what good should look like. It knows what good has looked like, in other projects, but what good will look like for your project, you need to know that.
No, I think that's a great way of putting it. So yeah, I guess we need to start wrapping up. So if seniority and judgment and experience are key, if you were advising a CEO or a founder, what would you tell them to do in the next 90 days? And we've covered, I think, most of this in terms of how they should work, how they should think. Um,
I think it depends on the size of the company, but let me, because I read a very interesting article about a week ago, and I wrote about that one also because it really stood out to me, because it's the first hard evidence of the potential impact of AI. So INSEAD and Harvard made a field study. So they studied 515 startup businesses in fast growing startups, basically. That these 515 companies was randomly divided into two groups where they were given the same access to AI tools, so the same tools. They had the same training, so they were offered the same training on these tools. They were giving mentorship on how to apply or using the tools, so they were able to have, ask people around it. They had the same budget of tokens and spend on it. So basically, they were giving the same technical and financial opportunity to apply AI to their business. It was the same randomly in two groups. The only thing that separated was that one group was shown how AI could be applied to completely transform ways of operating in a process, or how it's been applied in businesses where they have reimagined their whole operational flow. So basically, they've been giving a map to how AI can be, transforming a way of running a business. The other group was not prevented from doing so. They were just not given the map. So, what is the difference? The outcome from this was quite remarkable when you looked at it. So the group that was given the map, so to speak, and were allowed to apply it, or not allowed, but they were given a way of seeing things differently. They generated twice the revenue in average as the other group. They increased their winning of paying customers with 18%. So they grew the customer base faster. And they reduced their capital needs, so investment need, with 39.5%, I think it was, close to 40%. And they managed to scale their business, getting the new revenue, more customers, and scaling the business with this same headcount and lower cost base as the reference group. So if there is anything I would tell a CEO, especially for a smaller company or a medium-sized company, but smaller companies or startups, that would be it. Really spend the next 90 days, understand the technology and what it can do for you, but then don't just apply it to what you already are doing. Think to yourself, if I were to build this based on the capabilities that are now available to me, how would I do this different? because that's where the big impact looks like. And now we have this study that actually proves it. We need to recognize that for large enterprises, that's different. It's not as easy to just, rip out everything. And I was listening to a podcast promoting the digital twin strategy for more of legacy businesses or larger enterprises, where you basically take a small team of good driven employees, and you're tasking them with using AI to recreate parts of your business or the whole business, but probably parts of the business, make it work. And once they made that part work, you shift and replace. So you move and replace it with that. So that's a way to, giving yourself the safety of experimenting in isolation without impacting your day-to-day business. Once it's working, you shift and you move it in, and you take parts of your business where you feel that this would have the biggest impact, and you do that gradually. So, finding that starting point, where do we want to start? Start to build that new operational model and then move it in once it's working. Very
Makes
long
sense.
answer
No, no,
again,
it's
but
fantastic. No, I think there's a huge amount of takeaway from that. Um, so I guess final question. Um, with everything that we've said, what makes you optimistic about the future? I think often when we have these conversations, I almost feel like we're sort of trying to defend a certain way of working, or almost maybe are we try. Sometimes I'm concerned that I sound like I'm trying to cling on to the old ways, which I definitely don't think I am doing, but I'm wondering if it comes across like that. So I suppose in that sense, or in that sense, but also just in general, what makes you optimistic about the future of, I guess, product development, AI, and business, based on where we're at?
because the playing field is leveled for the first time in a very, very long time. That structural capital that was awarded Accentures and there are the large firms is no longer the moat that protects them. Now it's the applying of what we spoke about before, innovation skills, ways to be able to support with lateral thinking, to support with finding new business models. The parts that truly moves the needle for business is not the circus as a whole, but the work that actually matters. And it's a question about finding ways to deliver that the best way possible, and to, have a perspective and view that makes you valuable. So that's what makes me excited. It's the fact that, and I tell young people today, and especially, people starting the work, their career. I'm telling them that this is, there are no people that have 20 years or a full career of experience on this type of AI that we're working with today. You don't have senior consultants around the world that have 10 years of experience on this. You actually have very few people that has, moved beyond the prompting or simple tasks, yet less on this. So, this is the time with a level playing field when everybody can, based on their own merits, succeed. So it's
Yeah.
it's a good time to it's a good time to be alive.
Yeah, I guess we won't get into politics today. Um,
No, but I mean, if you want to go that way, if you ask me what my worry is, and I get this question a lot, with people who are asking about if AI is a hype or not. Um, and I did listen to you, Magnus, and I, in a way of echoing what he says, but I said this in the workshop yesterday as well. I believe that both can be true. And I think that's where most people are actually starting to agree on now. I think
yeah,
we're looking at some economically hardships coming our way because, the evaluations are starting to feel like the dot-com era. The way that money is accumulating in the very small ecosystem, basically circling around a very few providers where the evaluations goes up, goes up. There is no one who is challenging the rationale of burning through that money with a speed of haste without looking at how you're balancing the revenue and the cost side. And it just feels that we're repeating that pattern of limitless investments in a limited sector that goes up. And what happens if we don't manage to deliver on these, and how
Mm,
much patience does people have? And then it can come down. But the fact that it's a financial, potentially, I'm not saying that it is, but potentially it could be a hype or a bubble. But if that would be the case, it's actually us proving also that the technology we're working with is probably very fundamental, because these bubbles tend to appear when there is a dramatic shift, from a technology or different paradigms,
yeah,
and
yeah.
everybody wants to be in on it, which means that everybody overinvest. But it doesn't, shift the fact that the technology itself will profoundly change things. But I'm worried on the financial side because, yeah.
Conversation for another day, probably. But no, I've really enjoyed this. I mean, I think, there's some real practical advice. I think for businesses, both in terms of how to go about this, the kind of approach. And I mean, obviously, I'm a big advocate for the work that Liminal does and the approach that it takes. And I think it's absolutely necessary. And, to me, it's just the go-to approach that I think, I said on the previous podcast as well. I was talking to a CEO of an 800 million revenue business, so sort of, I guess, mid-size or sort of big SME maybe. And I just, every time I sort of have these conversations, obviously you and I are having a lot of these conversations with, I guess, prospects or just contacts, or, I think the stuff that you've brought out is really just like, well, look, here's your answer to actually do this stuff properly. And it's very, very difficult. Our slogan at Newform is sort of, app and platforms and AI is done properly, and it's quite hard to articulate what that means. So it's been great to be able to be able to get that, uh, or for you to have kind of articulated that so well. So yeah. So
Right.
finally, I guess, where can people find you? Where can they learn more about Liminal? I guess the obvious places, but I'll ask the question anyway.
Well, it's on our website, liminaldiscovery.com, or on LinkedIn. So Michael Eriksson on LinkedIn. I try to post frequently my thoughts and ideas there, and I'm always welcoming people to, comment or share, and I'm trying to read as much as possible from what others post. So I'm quite active there. But yeah, it's interesting, these conversations, and it's interesting because the opportunities are so big, and the certainty is so low. But to you, Adam, I think, and I've listened to some of your materials, and what I find very interesting is how you are. I don't think you're conservative at all. I think actually what you're trying to do, the way that I look at it with the team, is that you're taking the benefits, and you're seeing the shift as it comes, and you're moving your value provide that you can provide to the right place in the value chain. So you're not saying to people that, what, you shouldn't build on these tools, but you're telling them, build on these tools, but know the limitations. And once you're ready to take the next step, we're here. And we're not the old way of doing things. We do things different as well. And we're, updating and changing the ways we deliver. But, we will not, uh, we will not compromise on what will keep your business safe and secure.
Yeah, exactly. No, I appreciate you saying that. I think it's sort of, I guess, responsible innovation, I guess, is probably a phrase for it. I mean, maybe I need to I need to tag that. But I do appreciate you saying that, and I'm glad that that's the message that comes across. I'm very lucky, and obviously you know him as well very well, to have Daniel.
Yeah.
Because with the level of experience that he has, this is a different wave. Obviously, this is something completely new. Like you said, the opportunity is vast, but in a completely unknown way. But I think what you need is someone, or what I need, or we all need, is probably someone who can take a step back and say, okay, at each step, how do we then do the responsible thing without slowing things down? And I mean, I did a post this morning, which was, how much should you be spending on an app? Very simple title. And I think if you and I had answered that 5 years ago, it would have been a very, very different question. It would have been a different lead time. So that's still massively shifted. It's just making sure that, yeah, you're providing the guide ropes and the responsibility. And again, I think by what someone working with a company like Liminal is, you get that piece up front, and you get that, well, not just up front, but you get that throughout the engagement. So, yeah, I guess before we, let's say, blow more smoke in a certain place, no, it's great conversation, Michael, and
Likewise, Adam.
as you know, I really appreciate what you're doing, and yeah, it's just really insightful conversation. So, yeah, with that, thank you for joining me on the New Form podcast. And
Well, thank you for having me, Adam.
No, absolutely, and we'll do it again.
Sounds good.
Awesome.
The New Form podcast, episode 3 with Michael Eriksson.